Welcome in. My name is Kieran Gibbs. Sitting across from me is the incomparable Justice Williams. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing just fine. Welcome to episode 1 of Card Marks, a variety podcast centered around the wide world of sports entertainments. We do bookings, topics, reviews, and reactions. This week, booking, but we'll get to that later. Justice, can I ask you a question, sir?
What you got?
What was the first match that you remember enjoying?
Oh, goodness. That would be an episode of SmackDown from late 2006. Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero in a no-holds-barred fight. Loved the match. It was a fantastic match. Rey lost, which is a bummer. It made me very, very sad at the time, but I was still hooked in. Probably the best pay-per-view match I saw on regular TV at the time. Loved it.
Well, that's funny that you say that because the first match I remember enjoying was Rey Mysterio versus Shawn Michaels at the Eddie Guerrero Memorial episode. Thank you for asking, by the way.
Awesome.
All right, man. So without further ado, welcome to episode 1 of Card Marks, The Bookening.
A computer took your place, Daddy.
I just realized that The Bookening sounds like a Harlem Heat finisher.
The Bookening. Look. That's lovely.
All right, man. So 2007 was a real odd duck of a year for World Wrestling Entertainment. The planned WWE Championship rematch pitting John Cena against Triple H for WrestleMania 23 was scrapped when Triple H's quadricep took a role in Thighs of Demise 2, Revenge of the Tendon, at that particular year's New Year's Revolution pay-per-view against Rated RKO. But plans pivoted, try saying that 3 times fast, to his D-Generation X co-star and human buckle ad, Shawn Michaels. And the two had, honestly, in my opinion, a way better match than the one that Triple H and John Cena had at WrestleMania 22. John Cena would retain the championship, and the two competed again for the belt at Backlash in a fatal 4-way match with Rated RKO, Randy Orton, and Edge. But not before they had a barnstorm of a match that Shawn Michaels won in London on Raw. We'll get back to that a little bit later. Cena went on to fight the Great Khali in a bad match at Judgment Day, and then admittedly a pretty good match at One Night Stand 2007. Let me ask you a question. You remember that match?
One Night Stand 2007?
Yes.
Ooh.
It's the same show with Do-Rag Vince McMahon.
Yes.
Because I believe the next night was the draft, and Bobby had just won the ECW title, and he got drafted over to Raw.
Yes, he had regained the ECW championship from Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And yeah, the next night on Raw, he was forced to relinquish it as the last little bit of their feud. Great way to end a feud, honestly. Not really.
No, again, 2007 was a real odd duck of a year. And while I don't necessarily have an issue with John Cena's booking overall in this period, it's certainly not the worst of the Cena wins lull. But something that I think would be a little bit more intriguing narratively and a cool kind of storyline path to follow, an archetype I'm pretty partial to myself, is the old gunslinger. I love Logan. I love Unforgiven. So something I think would add a little bit of depth to John Cena's legacy with the WWE Championship in those first couple of reigns would be if Shawn Michaels had won the belt. Now, everything up to Backlash 2007 stays the same except for 2 things. Firstly, the only thing I changed about WrestleMania 23 is that instead of the WWE Championship main eventing the show, the World Heavyweight match between Batista and The Undertaker main events the show. Taker is easily at his career best, and Detroit loved that match almost as much as they hate winning seasons in football.
Well, I didn't see that coming.
Neither does their quarterback a lot of the time.
You just hit a whole wrestling promo, my friend.
Hometown heat. This particular booking differs again in real life in that the aforementioned Matt Classic on Raw in London is for the belt, and Michaels still comes out on top. Some people don't agree with giving away that sort of thing on free television, but part of what makes wrestling so compelling is its unpredictability, you know? Having that kind of shot in the arm, even being on the cheap, proves that these bouts deserve your attention at all times. Also, the Brits really love a good title change. Ask Davey Boy Smith and Bret Hart about that.
That's fair. I would agree. Given how infrequently WWE gets to travel overseas and give the Brits a good show, the fact that they got that awesome match is fantastic for them because they get that so infrequently just by them being there. So it's also really good on that level.
And wouldn't you agree that had that been for the championship and Michaels took it home, it would have been like when who did Daniel Bryan beat? Was it AJ Styles? Right before the Survivor Series?
Yes, it was.
It would have been like that shot in the arm. And imagine, it was already a pretty loud pop when Shawn got him with the Sweet Chin Music. It's actually probably my favorite match of all time.
Honestly, dude, like when I first saw the clip of, I remember when I first saw the clip of it, like online, like way back in 2007. I thought it was for the title, and then Sean just walked away and he won. I was like, oh, that wasn't a title match, and I was like, I could have swore they just, because I was like, why else run it back the next night if it's not for the title? To me, that's how I thought way back when.
Sand and gold just running through their fingers, man. Anyway, at this point, the status quo has been shaking up so drastically, and before a pay-per-view, no less, fan intrigue should pop a buy rate, I think it worked for Survivor Series, even though buy rates aren't a thing anymore. I think more people watched it. The match goes pretty much the same as it did in real life, with the finish being adjusted to a signature move party. Edge spears Michaels, who rolls out of the ring. Edge shifts his attention to Cena, who reverses another spear attempt into the FU. Randy slithers in with an RKO, the snaky bastard. But Michaels breaks up the pin and only just sneaks his foot under Randy's chin. 1, 2, 3. Michaels keeps the belt and the Heartbreak Kid rides again. And, just for the sake of keeping this simple, Spinner Belt Shawn, he's only going to have the strap until Vengeance Night of Champions. That's about when the Chris Benoit incident took place, and my tragedy booking is still in its infancy. So I'm going to try to stay away from the real life portion as much there as possible. After Vengeance Night of Champions, everything can go back to the status quo. Sorry, John, you're still going to be babysitting Khali in the semi-main event after he attacks you. At least you still get to do a bit of stage chucking with that big prick, because that was the best part of the show.
I remember that feud fondly, even though watching the matches back, not highlights in the career of either men, I would say, but very, very fun to watch. Because Khali's he's kind of got the Andre thing where it kind of looks like he's in pain quite often. But apparently, that was his peak in 2007, so when he gets to fight Cena and then Cena gets him up, young Justice, at that point in time, popped big. Older guy, Justice, is now like, okay, that was cool, but it took a minute to get there. But it was an interesting challenge for Cena to have at that point in his career, to see if he can try and work that type of match with a superstar like that.
Well, fun fact, actually, the Great Khali has wrestled matches with The Undertaker, Batista, Triple H, and John Cena, and I think he wrestled one with Shawn Michaels, too. John Cena is the only one to have a singles match with him that went above 2.5 stars from the Wrestling Observer Newsletter.
Really?
Yep. Everybody else's were below 2.5.
Interesting. I will say, as far as singles
Suck
matches,
it, Marks.
Yeah, as far as singles matches, I feel like that probably makes sense. My favorite Khali match is probably his triple threat with Batista and Ray.
Unforgiven 07.
That's probably my favorite Khali match, but yeah, I guess that would make sense.
So, back in Kieran's wonderful land of kayfabe, Shawn's first program is set after Jeff Hardy wins a #1 contendership battle royal on Raw, and I'm aware at this point that Jeff Hardy is a tag champion with his brother, and I'm also aware that they won him in a battle royal from John Cena and Shawn Michaels, but here's an idea. Don't put the tag championships on the people feuding for the title at Mania. Just don't do it. Eminem's there. The Highlanders are there. Figure it out. This will give Jeff a bit of exposure in the main event scene before his 2009 push, but ultimately, Shawn pulls out the win. Now, the Hardy Boys can get back together if you want. Are you happy now, Justice?
I would say that is a good idea, because I think the alternative is, at some point in time in 2007, Matt still is on SmackDown, but he ends up in a feud for the U.S. title and somehow tag champions with Montel Vontavious Porter at this given time. So Jeff would be still kind of on Raw, and I think at the time he was feuding with who? I think it was Umaga at the time, or was that prior?
That would have been Umaga, yep.
Yeah,
he's the one. No, he feuded with Umaga in 2008.
Okay, cool. So where was he in 2007?
Well, he was really into the Money in the Bank title scene.
Okay, yeah, you'll have to forgive me. Kieran was watching Raw at that time. I was watching SmackDown at that time. So there's bits and gaps and pieces that I missed on the events of the Superstars on Raw at that given time.
So I guess the brand split worked after all.
Indeed, somehow.
Alrighty. Shawn's next opponent, Edge. Saturday night's main event aired out of Toronto that year, and I'm a sucker for a hometown loser. Edge in 2007 was doing superb character work, and this is a championship feud that we've never actually seen, and there's no fridges with legs in it. You know,
Yeah.
that's pretty neat. Shawn and Edge are going to compete in a ladder match, with the finish being similar to SummerSlam 94, in that Shawn throws a super kick at the top of the ladder like he did with Razor Ramon, and he'll ride that win into a feud with his Rated RKO co-star, Randy Orton, at the last One Night Stand. This can be when Randy starts his natural transition from the smarmy evolution douchebag into the mad bastard that punts the elderly. It's 2007, so, blades aplenty. Randy and Shawn have a street fight, with the last spot being a chair-assisted sharpshooter. Randy collapses in a pool of his own blood after submitting to save his leg. As for John Felix Anthony Toretto, though, I think it's a semi-main event capacity would be the best for his character. Similarly to when Roman had his suspension punishment in 2016, he was kind of relegated to the mid-card a little bit, but not so much as a punishment. I think if he has a circus strongman theme kind of showing against the Great Khali, it'll work as an endearing, gimmick parade. What do you think about that?
I think that would be functional for John at that time. It's funny that you mentioned that because around that time, again, based on what I was watching from SmackDown, it seemed to be kind of one of the things that they were doing with Batista at the time because he was the world champ going into Mania 23 and Taker beat him for it. And though he feuded with Taker and then eventually Edge and Great Khali, and because Edge had an injury and everything, Batista had a hard time keeping his hands on the belt on SmackDown after he lost it in WrestleMania 23. And so for him, the story was always the chase up until he was eventually traded over to Raw in 2008. But with Cena, since he was champ all the way up until he was injured, he didn't have that necessarily kind of story. He was constantly just throwing down future competition that was just rising to the main event, like Yamunga or Bobby Lashley at the Great American Bash. So Raw felt kind of in that way a little bit, it felt like there was a ceiling, whereas it felt a little bit more fluid on SmackDown. So I feel like Cena would definitely have benefited from that, much like Roman did with his punishment U.S. title reign against Rusev, which actually was a pretty solid feud for the two of them at the time. But it was taking Roman out of the top spot, and I feel like he greatly benefited from that.
Oh yeah, just hopping out of 2007 momentarily. In that match, I believe that he did the Acolyte on top of the stairs. What does it do? What does it do?
Fair point. It's one of those things where it's like, it's just a neat visual. It's like the added spin in the Book of Boba Fett. It's like, it doesn't add much, but it's just there for a cool visual.
That's fair enough. Alrighty, let's get back in the time machine, back to 2007. And the Wabudu Warrior will eventually come back into the main event seat.
Oh, goodness.
The chickens come home to Terry Taylor eventually, though, and Cena earns a final opportunity at the belt for Vengeance Night of Champions on the condition that if he loses, he'd be traded to SmackDown and given a 1-year probationary period from any title shot. He worked the Great Khali twice, Justice. I think he earned it.
Yeah, I would say so as well. He did one for the business in that feud. One for the business.
Alrighty, well, Shawn Michaels and John Cena, in my opinion, and if they're a triple threat with Triple H at Survivor Series that 1 year is any evidence, they're just kind of incapable of not working well together. John Cena ultimately wins the series with an avalanche FU following a elbow attempt, but by this point, hopefully, John's endeared himself enough through giant slaying to warrant a bit of like a 2.5 chance, and he'll be free to destroy his pectorals in peace later that year.
Sounds fair to me. I would say, and the interesting thing about this, about the way you lay this out, is that with John not having to necessarily compete and be the WWE champion, we talk about this a number of times off the podcast, where when you're champion in WWE, that is pretty much the end of your development in terms of character. Like, your character then becomes, you are a champion. And that's just been the thing. Some people, it works better for heels as champion, but faces as champion have a hard time keeping their character evolving. And with John, I think he had reached a point where his character was in a bit of a funky place. Not bad. He was always awesome, but it was not necessarily connecting with the crowd, the 100% of the crowd, which is that fate or is it not fate? Who knows? But I feel like with not being in the title picture does give him an opportunity to kind of make a little bit more sense of what his character is supposed to be. And the audience can respect when someone is putting in a lot of work. So if he's working really hard in the ring and putting on great matches, or at least, watchable matches with the Great Khali, and still trying to find even further his character at the time, I think it builds for a much better received title reign come around to when he fights Shawn again, in this instance of the fantasy booking.
I think it's a neat, 60 to 90 day just exercise in the hero's journey, quote unquote. And I think it actually does just add a lot more depth to that Cena character, because I'm a big John Cena mark, but I'm not stupid to think that John Cena has pretensions of being lawfully good when he's chaotic neutral at best.
I would agree. Like I think I mentioned to you with currently as we're recording this, Peacemaker is a series on, that has been released for HBO Max. And I've talked to Kieran, at least on one occasion, about how it's interesting to watch that show through the lens of John Cena's career, because there's a lot of similarities there with a character who was supposed to be the good guy and his morals say he's the good guy, but there is a lot of trampling of others for the sake of being the good. So I think that would be very, very interesting for John to at least have just a little bit of time to kind of rework like who he was as he was transitioning away from the rapper to the Marine in that stage of his career. And then eventually the nebulous zone that he was all the way up until right before we got to the bright t-shirt phase of John Cena, where I don't know what we would call that phase of John, like in going into 2009 all the way up until, I guess, now.
I mean, I'd say you can kind of, like you said, the Marine era was about until 2009. And I'd probably call it the Super Cena era until he got the U.S. title.
That would be fair.
And then you can kind of call that post-thugonomics. Just because that's when I think other than, I'd say, probably Rusev, there has not been an example where he hasn't done the job.
That is fair. There is a marked distinction between when he became the United States champion again years later, and then everything after that is a different Cena from everything from 2009 to, I would say, around the time he was feuding with Dolph and the AJ Lee thing and all that stuff. I feel like there's two distinctive Cenas there, so that's fair.
And then I'd say probably now we're in post Firefly / Hollywood Cena era. That's like it's like a weird metamorphosis of Hollywood Hogan and The Rock.
Yes, I would agree. My only thing, and this is just a personal thing for me, I wish that because he comes back so infrequently now, I wish that his shirt that he would constantly come back to was just of a better design. He changes it from time to time, but the prominent one that everyone seems to, even in the games, they continue to market is that bright green one that he has with him basically doing, I think, like a front squat or a press.
I don't know weights, Justice. What are you asking me about?
But it's just like that shirt. That was the one. Most of the Cena shirts that I'm pretty like, okay, that's fine, whatever. For whatever reason, that one wasn't particularly my favorite, but I assumed that he likes it well. And I did like his gear that he wore for SummerSlam and everything like that. I honestly liked the "You Can't See Me" thing, that the navy blue design that he brought around the time, unfortunately, of the whole Saudi Arabia thing, where he came back. It was a post-China John Cena, so he came back with his lightning fist as a finisher. Yeah. That gear actually is fine. The lightning fist is interesting, I shall say. But yes, there we go.
I gotta say, I'm partial. Well, I'm also white trash, so I like the PBR Cena shirt. I really like that one. But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for joining me, Justice. We'll try to have a couple more of these out within the next couple of weeks. Did you have any final thoughts to leave with the people?
I would say that there is definitely, if this alternate route that you've created, there is definitely some story to tell here with Shawn Michaels as WWE champion. That would have been awesome, especially at the time, given that Triple H was out with the injury. So yes, I love this story. I think this would have been an awesome thing to experience. I'm glad you brought me on to the podcast to discuss it, and I can't wait to be on again and discuss some other really, really cool wrestling stuff and show you guys our relative age by virtue of our tastes and the things that we like in pro wrestling.
Absolutely. And maybe I can find some light in a booking of yours. Nice little teaser there.
Possibly. We shall see if we can chase or be the light in this wide world of negativity in wrestling. We shall see.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Please let me know. I like the engagement either way. You have a nice day. Stay cool.